Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Sarah from Handmade After Dark. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Australia, and welcome to my Stamping 101 series. So this is a series of mostly short videos just with a simple hint or tip to help with your crafting. So little things that can help fix issues that you may have or just make things a little bit easier. Today's video it's a little bit longer because we're going to be going through ink pads. So there are a number of ink pads that we can use. They all have different purposes, different surfaces that they work on, or other products that they can be used with. Some of them are different in the way that we need to clean them. And I'm also going to take you through re-inking as well, and a couple of other little bits and pieces. So to start with, we will start with Memento. So this is sort of the standard black ink that we use. So it's a water-based dye ink, and if you are using your Stampin' Blends, so these are the alcohol markers, this is what you need to use. You do not want to be using StazOn. You need to use a water-based ink. So Memento, blends, and so Memento will dry pretty quickly, so you don't have to wait ages for it to dry or heat set or anything like that. Just stamp and then you can color. If you are using yellow Stampin' Blends, I would recommend just giving it a few seconds to dry before you use your blends, but general rule, you can stamp and color pretty much straight away. So this is your staple black. If you don't have any ink pads, you need a black ink pad, this is your most versatile option. And to clean it, you can use either the Stampin' Chamois, which is this. So this looks really dirty and disgusting, but it's perfectly fine. This will happen. You just re-wet it when it starts to dry out, and clean your stamps. And it doesn't matter if it looks really disgusting like this, it still works perfectly fine. This will happen. So that is that. You can also use the Stampin' Scrub, which is this. So you've got we also have the Stampin' Mist. So you spray the Stampin' Mist on the side. There's 3 little raindrops in the corner. Sorry, I just realized I was out of view there. So down in the corner there, you've got 3 little water droplets. That's your wet side. So you spray a little bit of this on the surface and scrub your stamp, and then you can dry it off on the other side. So that's that one. Now, if you are watercoloring, you want StazOn. So StazOn is a solvent ink. It's permanent. It's also really good if you want to stamp on other surfaces, such as acetate, metal, plastic. What else is it on? Glass. So it's really good for other surfaces. Do not use your blends with this. It will run, but for watercoloring, this is what you need to use. Now, a couple of things with this. So, and I'll show you on this one. It comes with this little plastic covering, and you don't want to get rid of this when you open a new one. You do want to keep that and replace that each time. And it actually says protective inner cover, do not discard. Problem can be, after a while, particularly as you've been using your ink pad a lot, when you go to pull it off, you can end up getting ink all over your fingers. So what I did, and I know quite a few others have done this as well, and it's just come off from the heat, but that's all right. So let me press this down, see if it will stick. There we go. So I put on the top here, I put a couple of dimensionals, took the backings off. If you put the top down and then just pressing gently just to make sure it adheres. So you can see that case is now stuck in the top. And then you just have to put the lid back down and it's all good. If it does happen to come off like mine did the first time just before when I pulled this off, just put it down, put it back on, press in to just re-adhere, and you should be good to go. So that just means that you can just pull the top off each time. You don't have to worry about getting ink all over your fingers trying to get the plastic casing off. Now, when it comes to cleaning with this one, particularly for your photopolymer stamps, you need to clean your stamp straight away after using it. Do not leave them to sit and then clean later. You want to do it straight away. And cleaning is slightly different. You need the StazOn cleaner. This is what you need to use anytime you use StazOn. If you use just the Stampin' Mist or the chamois, it won't clean the ink off. And if you leave StazOn on your stamps, particularly photopolymer, it will damage the stamps. So with this one, you just rub it lightly against the stamp and then wipe. It says wipe off excess with a damp cloth. Just be careful with the type of cloth you're using. Avoid things like baby wipes, and avoid baby wipes in general for cleaning your stamps, other than sort of an emergency if you've got absolutely nothing else, because the baby wipes will leave little bits of fluff and lint on your stamps. So this comes, and this one is quite old and has been used a fair bit, so it's just got a little sort of fuzzy top, and so some of the cleaner will come out. You just rub that over your stamp and then either clean it off with you can use a damp cloth as long as it's one that's not going to leave lint, or you can wipe it off with your chamois. I actually keep a separate chamois just for using with the StazOn, so I clean with the cleaner and then wipe it off with the chamois, but I keep that chamois just for the StazOn. You could also then, if you wanted to, dry it off with the Stampin' Scrub, but the one should be enough. So that is StazOn. I'm just going to move things to the side so I don't forget what I've done and not done. All right. Next one is our standard coloured ink pads. Now, one question that gets asked quite a lot, and it might seem a really basic thing, but they can be a little tricky, is how do you open them? They can be a little stiff sometimes, and so a lot of the time most people just try and pull it open like that, and that often does work. But they can be a little stiff, it can be a little difficult sometimes. Easiest way is if you bring your thumbs to the top. You don't want to go right to the edge because it won't work, but if you come in a bit and just press, and you can see that's opened it up. Also, make sure you always close and seal your stamp pads properly. If you leave it sort of partially open, it's not closed properly, air will get in and it will dry out. So make sure it's closed, but to open, just press in and then you can lift up. If you find that's not working, come in a little bit closer. I have found that it's fine, sort of reasonably close to the edge, about there. Others, it's not enough, and I just come in a bit further until I find the point where it does open. Now, when you first get your ink pad, so this is a brand new one because I needed to replace my old style one. So you'll see on the back you have a bunch of little labels in different languages. So what I do, and what most people do, I want a label across the front. So I will just, and you can use a nail for this, or you take your pick tool and just pick the label up, and I'm just going to put that down, and then just lay that down across the front. And then when you've got your ink pads stacked in front of you, you can see what one is where. You're not having to lift them all up. Other thing that I do, because when if you're working on something and you've got lots of ink pads open, it's kind of hard to tell what color that is just from looking at that. So there is the bottom one there is blank, although you could use any of them. It doesn't have to be the blank one because they've all got the color. But if you take that off, and then so you can see there's a little groove along here, and I might just zoom in a little bit so you can see a bit better. I'm just going to take this, and I'm going to use my take your pick tool to help, and just place that down, and then I can easily see the color. So when I've got a whole bunch open, I know which is which, and I'm not going to accidentally use the wrong one and potentially contaminate the ink pad if I have used a different color with a stamp, haven't cleaned it, and then I put it in the wrong one. So that is that. Now to re-ink, so my Fresh Freesia needs a bit of re-inking, and I don't know how well you can tell, but you may find sometimes that the center of your ink pad starts looking a little pale, but the outside is still fairly dark. That's usually because quite often when we stamp, we tend to ink up the stamp in the middle. We forget about the outside edges. So the middle sort of dries out a bit, but the outside is still fairly well inked. So when you are inking up your stamps, it's really good to go all the way around. So to give you an example, I've just got some very vanilla cardstock here. I'm going to stamp up or ink up in the middle. And so it's looking a little pale. It's not too bad, but it does need a bit of a re-ink. And then if I ink up from around the edges, might need to do that one on a bit of an angle, but you can see that one is darker than this one, and that's sort of closer to what it should look like. That's a bit too pale, so that needs re-inking. So to re-ink, you grab your re-inker. I recommend when you buy any ink pad, get the re-inker at the same time. Then you've always got it on hand. Plus, there are a lot of other techniques you can do with ink pads. So highly recommend getting both at the same time. And then the only other thing you need is either an old plastic spoon, clean, or an old credit card, gift card, anything along those lines. And now some people have different preferences. Some do dots and some, sort of drag it along. I'm going to do a bit of both. So you can either just going all the way along just add dots of ink, or you can just squeeze and add some ink. And then take either your plastic spoon or your card, and we're just going to spread that in. So go in both directions, and you only need one spoon or card or whatever you're using for all your ink pads, because you can just clean this off on your chamois once you're done. One of the things I like with the spoon is you can sort of press in on the little inside of the spoon, and it helps to spread out. So you just want to spread it all out, all across, and I will clean that off before I forget. And I'll clean my stamp before I forget, even though I'm about to reuse it. So let's restamp from the middle, see how it's looking, and whether or not we need to add any more. All right, that's still a little bit too pale, so we do need a bit more, and I'm going to focus on the center, and I'm going to be a little more generous. And rub that in, make sure you go in both directions. And I think that should be good. So we will try again and see how that is going. Ink up in the center, because that was the area with the most in need of re-inking, and that's looking much better. It's definitely, like, if you compare, I can bring this around, if you compare to that first image, which was the center, that is definitely a lot paler, and that first one after re-inking was getting better, but still needed a bit more. It's looking much better now. And if it's still not enough, you can add more. It's not something where you just add a drop or two. You do need to add quite a bit, and it will also depend on how dry your ink pad is. But that is looking good now. And then I'll just clean off, just make sure my spoon is nice and clean, because I am going to be using it with the white in a second. But before I get to the white, Versamark. So the Versamark is we use it for heat embossing, because it is very slow drying, which is what you need for heat embossing, and so the powder will stick to it. You can also use it for creating a watermark image. So, and mine is very, very old, so it's looking a little dirty. It's not terrible, but it is an old one. So if you want a really subtle effect, so more subtle than if you were just doing, say this is Old Olive, if you want sort of paler than Old Olive ink on Old Olive cardstock, you could use the Versamark. So I'm not sure how well that shows up on the camera. I think that's looking okay there, but it is a really a much more subtle effect, which, if that's, when that's what you want, that is a good option to use. Just be mindful, because it is a very slow drying ink, depending on what you're doing, you may want to heat set, or just heat it and dry it a little bit quicker. And now the ink, and I will add a bit more to my ink pad. This is a really thick, I'm going to see if I can, I don't know how well this is going to work, but it's a really thick one. So it's the same sort of process, but just be mindful it's a very thick ink. And so you do need to spread it in well. And hopefully I have got all the ink off. I'm just going to check on my hand because I do not want to be getting fresh freesia ink in my Versamark, but that's looking pretty good. Now, to clean stamps when you've used Versamark, my preference, because the Versamark is quite sticky, rather than using the chamois, I prefer to use the Stampin' Scrub, just because it gets it off a bit better. So I'm just going to give a couple of squirts of the Stampin' Mist and give it a good scrub in that, and then just dry it off on the other side. And I'm actually going to do the same with the spoon that I use for blending in my inks, just to make sure that it is all off, because it is a bit sticky. That's looking pretty good. Alrighty, and the last one is the white. So this is a pigment ink. Now, when you first get this, it actually comes as a uninked pad. They had to change the way it was done a while back. So you get an uninked pad. It looks like this. This one is brand new. I haven't inked it up yet. So it's the same, soft texture, and then you get the ink with it. So same sort of process, just be mindful that because this is completely uninked, and I might just give that a good shake before I start, because it is completely uninked, you are going to be adding quite a bit more than you would when you're just re-inking, and you may need to give it a couple of goes to get enough, but just add some, rub it in, and then see how it's going. And as you can see, I don't know if I can get a good angle, but it's really thick. So it's a lot like the Versamark in that it's a very thick ink, and so similar to the Versamark, this does take quite a while to dry. I will quite often heat set when I use the white, because it does take a long time to dry. You can also use it, because it does take a long time to dry, you can also use it for heat embossing as well. So quite often people will use it to heat emboss when they're heat embossing white. So they'll use white powder and the Craft White ink pad, and it makes the embossed image a bit more vibrant, because it's sort of two lots of white. So it's a good option for heat embossing. So I reckon So you can see, it hasn't all sort of soaked in, and it does take a bit longer, but there's a few areas where I need a bit more, I think, because it's not, oops. So you do need to make sure it's well covered. And so you will definitely use a lot more of the re-inker than just re-inking, because you're essentially starting from scratch. So we'll just get that all soaked in. Well, not quite soaked in. It's going to take a bit of time for that, but that's all right. All right, I think that is looking pretty good at this stage. Let's give it a go and see how it's looking. So I'm going to bring my Old Olive cardstock back in, ink this one up, and there we go. So that's pretty good. So you can, well, don't know if you can see all that well, but you may be able to see that it still looks wet, and that's because this does take longer to dry. So depending on what you're doing, I recommend using your heat tool to help dry it a bit quicker, just so that you don't accidentally smudge it. And don't be afraid to be heavy-handed with the re-inker when you are first inking up your stamp pad. And if it's not enough, just add some more. And to clean, I also, with the white one, I also prefer to use the Stampin' Scrub for this one, just because it's a thicker, stickier ink. So I use my Stampin' Scrub. You can still use the chamois. I would recommend, if you do, particularly if you use the white a lot, you may want to consider a separate chamois for the white. Or what you can do with the chamois is cut them up. So if you don't want to have a separate one, you could say cut it in half, or you can cut into quarters. Keep one for your regular cleaning, and one, you could keep one for your Versamark and the white craft ink, or also for if you wanted to use for the StazOn after you've cleaned it with the StazOn cleaner. If you want to use chamois, and you definitely want to keep a separate one for that, you could potentially even do one side for the white and one for the StazOn. But yeah, you can cut the chamois up. So if you don't want to buy multiples, just cut them down to whatever size you need, and you should be good to go. All right, I think that is everything. Let me just bring everything back in so we can check. We have done Versamark, so heat embossing and watermark. White for when you want white, obviously, and also can use for heat embossing. Do make sure, if you are using this for heat embossing, that it is well inked up, because if there's not enough ink on it and it dries too quickly, it won't work properly for heat embossing. We have the regular ink pads. We have the StazOn, which is for watercoloring, and if stamping on other surfaces like acetate, metal, glass, anything like that. And then the staple black memento, which is for your everyday stamping, and Stampin' Blends as well. Alrighty, I hope that was helpful. Please remember to like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out, and also means you don't miss out on any upcoming videos, particularly the weekly lives. And thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you have any questions, if there's anything I can help you with. All of these products are available in my online store. There is a link in the description if you need to purchase anything. If you have any questions about any of the products first, please do let me know and I will help you out. Alrighty, thank you so much for watching. Till next time, happy crafting.